In the quiet town of Willow Creek, nestled between rolling hills and a winding river, James Harper lived a modest life. A tall man with calloused hands and a warm smile, James was a mechanic at Grayson's auto shop, a run-down garage on the edge of town. The shop's owner, Harold Grayson, was a stern man with a reputation for squeezing every penny out of his customers and employees. James didn't love his job, the long hours, the grease-stained coveralls, the constant pressure to work faster, but it kept the lights on for his family, his wife, Emily, a part-time librarian with a knack for storytelling, and their 10-year-old son, Liam, a dreamer with a spark in his eyes. Liam was the heart of the Harper household. He loved acting, spending hours in his room practicing lines from movies or putting on one-boy shows for his parents. One crisp November evening, he burst through the front door, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Dad, Mom, I got the lead role in the school play," he shouted, clutching a crumpled flyer for A Christmas Carol. Liam had been cast as Tiny Tim, the frail but hopeful boy whose words touched hearts. The performance was set for next Friday at 6 p.m. at Willow Creek Elementary. Emily clapped her hands, and James scooped Liam up in a bear hug. "That's my star," he said, his voice thick with pride. But a shadow loomed over James's joy. Fridays were the busiest day at Grayson's auto shop. Harold Grayson ran a tight ship, and time off was unheard of. James had already used his one sick day that year when Emily caught the flu, and Grayson had docked his pay for it. Still, James couldn't bear the thought of missing Liam's big moment. Every night at dinner, Liam recited his lines, especially, "God bless us, everyone," his voice ringing with hope. James knew he had to be there, no matter the cost. The next morning, James gathered his courage and approached Grayson in his cluttered office. The air smelled of burnt coffee and motor oil. "Mr. Grayson," James began, his hands fidgeting, "I need to leave early next Friday. My son's in a school play. It's important." Grayson didn't even look up from his ledger. "No chance," he growled. "You skip work, you're done. I've got a line of guys waiting for your job." His words hit like a punch. James nodded silently and returned to his workbench, his mind racing. Emily suggested they record the play, but James saw the disappointment in Liam's eyes when they discussed it. His boy wanted him there, in the audience, not watching a shaky video later. As the week wore on, James wrestled with his choice. He thought about his own father, a truck driver who was always on the road, missing birthdays and school events. James had promised himself he'd be different. On Friday, he made his decision. He worked his shift, fixing a stubborn carburetor and changing oil until 5 p.m., then quietly clocked out. He drove to Willow Creek Elementary, his heart pounding with both guilt and anticipation. The auditorium was packed with parents, teachers, and kids. James found a seat near the back, his work boots still dusty. When the curtains parted and Liam limped onto the stage as Tiny Tim, James forgot about Grayson and the shop. Liam's performance was magical, his voice carried a quiet strength, and his smile lit up the room. When he delivered his famous line, "God bless us, everyone," the audience erupted in applause. James clapped until his hands hurt, tears streaming down his face. For that moment, nothing else mattered. But reality crashed in the next morning. Grayson called James into his office before he could even change into his coveralls. "You left early," Grayson said, his voice cold. "Pack your stuff. You're fired." James didn't argue. He gathered his tools, a worn wrench set, a trusty screwdriver, and walked out into the chilly morning. His truck felt heavier as he drove home, dreading the moment he'd have to tell Emily they'd lost half their income. Willow Creek was a small town, and news traveled fast. By Monday, everyone from the diner to the post office was talking about the mechanic who got fired for attending his son's play. People shook their heads, some in sympathy, others in disbelief. Unknown to James, one man had been watching closely that night at the play, Victor Langston, a reclusive millionaire who had moved to Willow Creek 3 years earlier. Victor was an enigma. He lived in a modest house on the outskirts of town, drove an old pickup, and rarely spoke about his wealth, which came from a tech company he'd sold a decade ago. He had a habit of observing people, looking for those who acted with kindness when no one was watching. Victor had been at the play to support his niece, Sophie, who played one of the Cratchit children. He noticed James in the audience, his face glowing with pride as he watched Liam. When Victor heard about the firing, he felt a pang of recognition. His own father had worked endless shifts, missing every milestone of Victor's childhood. James's sacrifice struck a chord. Meanwhile, James struggled to find work. The town's only other garage wasn't hiring, and bigger cities were too far for a daily commute. Emily picked up extra hours at the library, but money was tight. Liam, sensing the tension, stopped talking about the play, though he kept the program tucked under his pillow. James felt like he'd failed his family, even though he'd made the right choice for his son. A week later, a letter arrived, sealed with the logo of Langston Enterprises. It invited James to a meeting at a sleek office building downtown, one Victor had recently bought for his new ventures. Curious but nervous, James arrived in his best button-up shirt, feeling out of place among the polished furniture. Victor greeted him with a warm handshake and a knowing smile. "I was at the play," Victor said, leaning back in his chair. "I saw you cheering for your boy. Then I heard what Grayson did. I admire a man who puts family first, James. That's rare." James shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what any father would." "Not every father," Victor said softly. "I'm starting a new business, a car repair shop, but one that treats people right. I need someone honest, skilled, and dependable to run it. I want you to be my manager." James blinked, stunned. "Me? I'm just a mechanic. I don't know anything about managing." "You know more than you think," Victor said. "You showed up when it mattered. That's leadership. I'm offering you a salary, double what Grayson paid, plus benefits and flexible hours so you'll never miss another school event." James's throat tightened. He thought of Liam's smile, Emily's late-night budgeting, the weight of the past week. "Why me?" he asked. Victor smiled. "Because you remind me of what matters." James accepted the offer, shaking Victor's hand as tears welled up. When he told Emily and Liam that evening, the kitchen erupted in cheers. Liam hugged his dad so tightly James could barely breathe. "You're gonna be a boss, Dad," Liam said, grinning. Harper's Auto Care opened 3 months later, a bright, welcoming shop with a sign that read, "Family First, Service Second." James hired a small team, including a young mechanic who reminded him of himself, and made sure they had time for their own families. The shop thrived, drawing customers tired of Grayson's overpriced, rushed service. People loved James's honesty. He'd tell them when a repair wasn't needed, saving them money and earning their trust. Grayson's auto shop, meanwhile, began to falter. Customers drifted away, put off by Harold's gruff demeanor and shady practices. By spring, his lot was half empty, and he was forced to cut hours. James never gloated, he was too busy building something better. Victor remained a quiet presence, stopping by the shop occasionally to check in. He never told James the full story of his own childhood or why he'd chosen to help, but James sensed the older man's kindness came from a deep place. Victor became a regular at Liam's plays, always sitting in the back, clapping softly. Liam's love for acting grew. The next year, he landed a role in the town's community theater, and James was there for every performance, front row, with Emily by his side. At Christmas, when Liam recited, "God bless us, everyone." During their family dinner, James looked around the table, his wife, his son, their cozy home, and felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. Willow Creek never forgot the story of the mechanic who chose his son over his job. And though Victor Langston stayed out of the spotlight, he knew he'd made a difference. For James, it was a miracle born from a single choice, to show up, to love fiercely, and to trust that sometimes, the world rewards a good heart.